Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. I'm Patrick, flying solo. And I wasn't planning on doing a podcast episode after this game, the game where the Knicks smacked the Warriors 132-94 at Madison Square Garden. But after having some interesting Twitter conversations and some interesting texts on this Warriors fan group text I'm on with some friends, it's worth talking about for a little bit. It's funny because I think last week I put out an episode loosely titled "Have the Real Warriors Arrived?" and that was after the Celtics game, and largely that was just kind of pointing out that after the Celtics game the Warriors revealed who they can be. Right? Wasn't saying that it was going to be smooth sailing all the way or that all of a sudden they were going to be back, this world beater team, but they had kind of dug out and shown themselves for the first time. We knew that they could rise up to it. And then, just on Tuesday, I put out an episode talking about how James Wiseman could legitimately help this team down the road. And I still believe that. I don't want to overreact to one game, just like I didn't want to overreact to a single win. But, this one was rough. The Knicks are the hottest team in the league. I believe this was their 8th straight win. And like everyone else, they got up for the Warriors and took it to them, And we knew when Steph went out, I talked about this after the injury, that it was going to be pretty ugly until he gets back, at the very least. So there's going to be a lot of games lost. And that's something that I have to remind myself of watching these games, because even though you know that and you see the bigger picture, it's really, really easy to watch these games and just be like, oh man, we're trash, we're garbage and all this other stuff. And, blow it up or trade all the young guys for fringe vets, et cetera, et cetera. And I will keep saying, I'm not blowing sunshine and I'm not blowing smoke. I think that this team is not where it needs to be, obviously, but I think the pieces can come together in some fashion. And also I believe that if there's a move to be made, it will get made. That's it. I was telling some friends on this group text that, the Warriors overall, this game, look like trash, but what gives me some optimism is that the Warriors, and I've talked about this throughout the season, the Warriors rotation 1 through 9, right? The shortened playoff rotation, which is actually probably shorter, but Kerr likes to go deeper into his bench. And folks have pointed out to me that sometimes he goes 10 deep, right? So the Warriors rotation from 1 through 8 is actually looking more and more solid. We knew it was good 1 through 6, the starters plus Poole. And then Dante DiVincenzo's back. And then Jonathan Kuminga is looking solid. So that's 7 and 8. So figuring out 9 and a potential 10th person is what I think is really, really important. And I made the argument the 10th person could be Wiseman down the road. In this game, he looked okay. He looked decent for a while. He was fighting for rebounds. He was boxing out, all these things. And the Knicks, they have some big dudes. Mitchell Robinson is just as big as James Wiseman. He actually looked bigger than him. I've talked about before how Wiseman, for as strong as he looks, he kind of has narrow shoulders compared to some of the other dudes in the league. And Mitchell Robinson is one of them. Jericho Sims is also a strong dude, a little bit shorter, but really, really strong and athletic. And Isaiah Hartenstein, who's just a very, I kind of like that dude. I liked him on the Clippers last year. And he's a guy that is I've talked about Jay Huff on the South Bay Lakers. He's like Isaiah Hartenstein is like a souped up version of Jay Huff, right? So he dunked on Wiseman once in the fourth, and it was kind of ugly, but whatever. What are you gonna do? Wiseman in the fourth looked a little listless. He made more mistakes, and it is what it is, right? Like people are going to watch that and be like, oh, see, he hasn't gotten any better, but he has improved. He has improved in the sense that he's setting better screens. He got called for a moving screen, but that's obviously a judgment call. And we went through all the Andrew Bogut years of moving screens, and they decided to call these on young guys, on rookies, on guys who are just coming up. So it's that kind of call. But I think that he's still showing something. And that fourth quarter, like, you just got to erase that one. Yes, it was lifeless, listless. I was tweeting with someone on Twitter. Maz goes by the name @BaySplashBros. And, he was talking about how the fourth quarter young guys looked really, really sad out there. And to some extent, like, the lack of energy was very, very apparent. I felt like Jonathan Kuminga was the only guy who was actually playing hard to win in a way. Down by 30, he was still like going after it. And then, the point that Moses Moody is still lacking confidence, and that Wiseman has a tendency to get down on himself. So I think it's there. Patrick Baldwin Jr. and Ryan Rollins, those guys, they're like completely not ready. They're not even anywhere close to the level as the other three dudes, right? They've barely played. They're just getting a taste of the NBA, and they're in Madison Square Garden. And it was clear that they were just trying to get theirs. They were hyped up by the moment. They were shooting shots. Patrick Baldwin went 1 for 6. Ryan Rollins was just all over the place. And honestly, it would probably have been better if Jonathan Kuminga played point guard on that squad, on that unit, than Ryan Rollins. But it is what it is. And those guys don't know how to play together. I mean, Wiseman's played with them, but no one was looking for him. And it is what it is. Like, it's, I'm not saying it was great. I'm not saying it's not a big deal, but like, I'm not going to base a judgment based on that performance, right? Because like, if you lump Kuminga in with that group, that's ridiculous. Kuminga is really, really good, and he's showing how good he can be. Just because he was a minus 23 on the night doesn't mean that, oh, let's trade him. But this was a game where the Warriors didn't have Steph, of course, Andrew Wiggins, Dante DiVincenzo, and JaMychal Green. The first three are really, really important, of course. And I've said that this team without Steph and Wiggins is going to live and die by how Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole play. And Jordan Poole played okay. He played pretty well early on, but his percentages weren't that great. Only 8 for 18, 2 for 8 from 3, 4 turnovers. He had some moments where he was getting reckless, sloppy, sped up, whatever you want to call it. He did, however, get to the line, 8 for 9 from the line, and he ended up with 26 points. Klay, in 26 minutes, 5 for 12, only 1 for 5 from 3, 4 boards, 2 assists, 5 turnovers, 11 points, minus 28. As much as people want to just harp about James Wiseman and the fourth quarter and everything, this was just a game where Klay and Poole couldn't carry them over. Like, the Knicks are good. The Knicks are very good, and they were the better team by far tonight. But one thing people talked about to me was like, you just want to make sure that the effort, the energy, and that the losing don't become the way of the Warriors now. You know what I mean? That even though there's going to be a bunch of losses, that that doesn't lead to like these negative vibes or being okay with losing for the rest of the season, for like the next month even. You want to be sure that you're doing the same things and doing all the right things. And that's a very, very valid point. And this guy Mike made that point to me, and I do agree with that, because you can look and say, I could say, hey, spots 1 through 8 look good, but if the vibe isn't there, then that could be questionable. But again, you look at the dudes who were on the court in the fourth quarter, Kuminga is the only guy who's in the rotation, like legit rotation, right? I'm hoping Moody can get, sneak up into the maybe 9 or 10 spot. That's pretty debatable right now. I've talked about how I think Wiseman could, give like Kuminga type minutes from last season where he would come in just for energy and size and in certain matchups, right? Like 5, 8, 10 minutes. If you look at this game, you say maybe not, but let's play it out a little bit longer. So I'm not going to look at that fourth quarter and be like, oh man, these are the Warriors. No, the Warriors are from, 1 through 8 so far. Steph, Klay, Draymond, Wiggins, Looney, Jordan Poole, Dante DiVincenzo, and Jonathan Kuminga, right? So I'm still good with those guys. Klay is an issue because he hasn't been shooting well. And I was texting my buddy Aram in Toronto, and I was like, with the two most inconsistent guys on the Warriors this season, at least important guys, rotation guys, Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson, I said, I'm not sure which one I get more frustrated with when they're not playing well. And he was like, I think it's Klay. He thinks he gets more frustrated with Klay. And I tend to agree because Jordan Poole can be really frustrating, as if you listen to this podcast, you could tell. But he can do other things. Like in this one, he didn't shoot that great, but he got to the line 9 times. And usually Klay, if he doesn't shoot well, he doesn't give you much else. Obviously, he's lost a bit of a step on defense, and he's never been the greatest rebounder or passer. He had, like I said, 4 boards and 2 assists in this one. That's really good for him, right? So not knocking Klay, but that is a concern. He's obviously, as I've talked about, he's gotten out of his head on some of these things from earlier in the season, but his stroke comes and goes. And I think that's something to keep an eye on. You hope that maybe he can find a better rhythm in the springtime as it goes, but you don't know. You don't know. Like, this might be the Klay that we have. This might be it. But as long as the rest of those rotation guys are locked in, I'm confident in this team. That being said, hey, you want to talk trades? Sure. A lot of people are like, let's make a trade. And I'm totally down for a practical trade, something that makes sense. But there's a lot of like, just move Wiseman, move Moody, whatever for somebody. And it's like, but for who? And you have to look at the contracts. And I'm no contract expert. That's not my favorite part of sports. To me, you have to think about like now and long term. That's whether it's next season or a couple seasons from now, in terms of like, who are you trading for? What can they give you? Because if you want to trade for center, what are you willing to give up? Are you willing to give up Wiseman and Moody for somebody, for a Kelly Olynyk, for Jakob Pertl? I don't know. There's been a ton of other names, like, people want Caruso. We've talked about that before. Vanderbilt, a bunch of other folks. I mean, we'll see. I get also wanting to have another vet in the rotation on the bench because, as I've said before, I don't think JaMychal Green is it. He just hasn't shown anything. He doesn't seem like one of those guys like who's going to, like, he doesn't have like that, championship vibe to him. But I could be wrong. Maybe if he's the guy who ends up like in the 10th spot or 11th or something, or somebody in a pinch when guys get in foul trouble. But hey, I'm all for trades, but like, this game stunk. But again, taking a step back and be like, hey, they were missing like a bunch of dudes, and I'm not ever going to count Rollins and Patrick Baldwin Jr. as guys I'm going to like analyze on the court just yet. Yeah, they've gone off in the G League, if you weren't aware, right? Ryan Rollins had a triple-double, but that's a G League, right? But at least at that level, he can play. He has something. So development moving forward, he'll be able to give you some. Those guys played because they needed extra bodies. Remember, because of the injuries. So it was not fun to watch, but I don't know. I'm not going to go too far into that fourth quarter. the vibes, yes, those are things that Steve Kerr needs to focus on. That he needs to make sure, as coach, he needs to make sure that this team doesn't get used to losing, doesn't accept losing, and that they're constantly like looking at the bigger picture and looking forward to where this team goes next. But yeah, the Nets game is going to be interesting because it's the second night of a back-to-back, and Steph and Wiggins and Dante DiVincenzo and JaMychal Green are all out, and Klay is not going to play. So the only starters available are Draymond and Looney. Looney's going to play because at least a few minutes because he, wants to keep his streak going of games played. Draymond, I wouldn't blame him if he wanted to sit out of it. I wouldn't blame him if once the game got out of hand, it's like, okay, let me sit. I'll see it on Christmas against the Grizzlies. But it's going to be ugly. It's potentially ugly. It could also be, hey, let's see the young guy surprise us. But at the end of the day, what I'm looking for and what I said after Steph got hurt is let's see some progress from some of these guys who are trying to crack the rotation. And that to me is the 3 lotto picks. Kuminga is already in the rotation, like I said. So I'm looking for him to improve and show more of that leadership that I've talked about. And I'm looking for Wiseman he'll have ups and downs, right? He had ups. He had some decent minutes in Philly, barely played in Toronto. Kerr was chasing that win, and he got it. This one, he decided not to chase it, and that's why you saw so many minutes from the lotto picks and the rookies. And Wiseman actually had some good moments, but he also had some bad ones. So it's going to be up and down. And just like Kuminga earlier in the season, not that it's exactly the same, he had some ups, he had some downs, and he started having more ups and then fewer downs. That's what I'm hoping for. I'm not claiming any knowledge of the future, but that's what I'm hoping for. I talked to Airman Toronto, who will be on after the Nets game. I talked to him, and he wondered about whether or not I think Wiseman will go back to the G League. And I was like, yeah, totally. He totally could. Why not? Send him down there, if he's not going to get minutes. But he got minutes, right? Like, I'm glad Wiseman got 22 minutes in the NBA on national television. He may not have looked great. He may not have improved his trade value, but, it's about getting those reps, and playing against some of these dudes is better for him than playing against G Leaguers all the time. But if and when it's time to go back, then leave him there. Leave him there for a minute. And, hey, I don't know what the Santa Cruz Warriors schedule is, but on the next homestand, maybe you see him shuttle back and forth from Santa Cruz to SF. Sure, why not? Have him play a bunch of minutes in Santa Cruz and have him play spot minutes or 5 minutes the next night at Chase Center. That's what they did with Kuminga and Moody towards the second half of last season. I don't know. This one was garbage. And again, still feeling those negative vibes of just a bad loss. But, this team isn't where it needs to be. At the end of the day, it's try to get better. And the ways that you can get better are internal development, that some of these lotto picks that guys like Moody and Wiseman can get sharper. Or honestly, then if that doesn't work, the other way is by adding guys. So that's either trades or the buyout market or something like that. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. There's that rumor of Wiseman and Kuminga for Jae Crowder or something, and I'm not buying that one. I'm not buying that one at all. I hope not. That would shake me to the core. I would take Kuminga and Crowder play the same position. Who would I rather have at this point? I don't think Crowder is going to be. He's a little bit different from Kuminga. He's like a sturdier, more veteran, better shooter, whatever. But that would be an awful, awful trade. Anyway, that's just off the top of my head. But Nets game coming up. Hopefully, like I said, just looking to see how they show out and getting through these rough games. It's a rough stretch. We knew it. So if you're riding through it, cool. If it's really, really rough for you, too rough to handle, come back in a month. Maybe stuff will be back by then. Who knows? But that's why we watch the games, we watch them to see how these guys can get better. And, this is a game where it's like, okay, Kerr better realize what he needs to help this team with, especially the young dudes. And the young dudes better realize how they need to get better. That's it. Done. And they have the talent, they have the smarts, they have the quote unquote culture and infrastructure, but time will tell. Time will tell, and time will tell whether or not by the trade deadline on February 9th, whether or not they need to make moves to accelerate that improvement.